Joining us now is James Price. James, are you there, sir?
I am, sir. Good to see you.
That's all right. I knew it was you, but I thought I'd better check it was you. You know, there's nothing worse than interviewing you as Miranda Smithers and then suddenly you show up, James, although, you know, it's 21st century. Who knows what might have happened?
I've been called worse, don't worry.
Who knows what might have happened? Well, let's start then with Starmer's big moment today. Big, long speech. He set out his 6 pledges, which he says, you know, is achievable before the next election. Although, interestingly, migration didn't get an exact mention. Let's hear, though, what the Prime Minister had to say about how Labour are planning on handling the backlog.
And we're not hanging around. We're clearing the asylum backlog, processing thousands more claims than when we came to office. Returns of foreign national offenders up 29%, on track for the highest overall number of returns for 6 years. That is what dealing with the problem seriously looks like. A much more meaningful deterrent than spraying taxpayers' money up the wall or the ridiculous Rwanda gimmick.
So there it is. He's making it happen, James, without spending millions on things like, well, gimmicks like Rwanda. I would take with a pinch of salt his pledge on, you know, this down by 29%. We all know how it works. You take a small window of where there was a couple of days when you managed to process X amount of applications very quickly, and that's the figure you use. I'm not absolutely sure that in 19 weeks in office that's enough time for anyone to make a difference, is it?
Well, it's certainly made a difference in the negative. If you look at the way that the budget has negatively affected business confidence, investment confidence, the stock market, the economy in general, that's certainly made a difference. Certainly made a difference in, let's say, the big issue, which is immigration, scrapping the Conservatives' law that said if you enter this country illegally, you'll never be able to stay here. They got rid of that, so that's making a difference immediately in a negative.
Yeah.
What I'm not sure will make any benefit is, I've got some of them written down here, the 6 milestones, the 7 pillars, the 5 missions, the 3 foundations. I think there were also 6 first steps. I'm not sure you could have more than 1 first step, but there we are. This is exactly kind of government by blob. And I think the fundamental problem that the Labour Party are going to continue to have is that the tools that they have to do this job, the civil service, the arm's length bodies, the quangos, the sort of pseudo charities that meant to be on their side, the trades unions, all of these things now are set up to design to stop government activity, to stop addressing these kinds of issues. The Conservatives didn't deal with this problem, and they were the party probably better suited to try and do that, given the kind of reforming zeal that somebody like a Mrs. Thatcher had, and the fact that Conservatives are supposed to be naturally more sceptical of a big state, of a large state that tries to do too much. They, instead of dealing with the issue, they, I think it's fair to say, probably accelerated a lot of these problems, or certainly didn't have a grip on the civil service growing itself. The Labour Party isn't going to do it either. The reason he's already had to do this reset with these first steps and foundations and goodness knows what else is because he realises already he can't actually do anything. You pull the metaphorical lever in one of these departments and nothing happens. And the reason it doesn't happen is either going to be because of some poor legislation that they can't get rid of, they won't get rid of, even though they could do. It's going to be the European Convention on Human Rights. It's going to be some UN treaty this. It's going to be natural England stopping, you from building any kind of infrastructure because of the lesser spotted newt. Until we get ourselves into that mindset that we need to change that actually give government freedom of action in any way, shape or form, we're not going to be able to deal with anything else he's talking about.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, certainly on the house building 1.5 million pledge, which is pretty much what the pledge, I think, has been for the last number of years. Yeah. I wonder, I mean, we could probably take a litmus test of that now, couldn't we? I mean, they're 6 months in, nearly. So you'd be able to get a gauge as to whether, that is progressing well. I'm not hearing any mention of that, so I'm perhaps assuming, maybe too pessimistically, possibly, James, that maybe they're not on the right path as yet.
No, and every day that we don't address these kinds of core issues, and I think that the slightly downstream of the inability to do anything, the thing that really matters to people, as you say, cost of housing, and that is just fixed by building more, cost of energy, which is done by getting more diverse and cheap, clean energy going, or even not necessarily clean energy. We still just need to get energy of some kind going again. And Ed Miliband is taking us backwards on that. And the other big one is immigration, which, as you rightly said, he didn't put a pledge or a mission or a stepping stone or a wish to Father Christmas or whatever about immigration at all. Every day we don't deal with these things, the problem gets bigger and bigger. Since Labour have come in, 20,000 people, mostly young men of fighting age, have crossed over the channel. And that means 20,000 more people we have to process, we have to put up in hotels, we have to worry about whether they're going to be able to assimilate into our culture, because we're not actually doing anything to try and assimilate them or tell them why British culture is superior to anywhere else on earth. The problem gets worse and worse and worse. And when you talk about house building and immigration combined, we know the fact that we built about 80,000 houses last year at about a time when we had a net increase of 800,000 people joining. Yeah. So unless you've got 10 people to a house being built, which is not happening, we're standing still on that issue. We're going back on that issue. And this is the problem, that all of these issues get stored up and stored up. And Starmer will get increasingly desperate, because I think his theory of government, his theory of how you change things, just is incapable of meeting the reality of the fact that he says something, and yet someone will come along and say, no, but the lesser spotted newt, you can't build the houses. Or no, we've told Greta Thunberg we can't build any clean nuclear energy because Greta Thunberg is more important than anything else. No, we can't send these people back, despite them being, actual paedophile rapists in many cases. We can't deport them because of their right to a family life. Despite one case, it was a chap's own stepdaughter he raped. You can't fix these sorts of issues downstream until you fix those central issues, and he's not willing to do that, clearly. Yeah, clearly. It was an hour and a half we'll never get back, James. I fell asleep there, so it's fine. Listening to the Prime Minister. Let's look at this story. This is an exclusive for Talk, revealing that half of all counter-terrorism referrals are children. Let's hear from Mark Rowley. He's currently the Met Police Commissioner. Speaking of the issue of extremism in relation to social media back in 2018, let's have a listen to what he said.
Despite major progress in recent months, I'm not as reassured by the level of proactivity and commitment from communication service providers about tackling the broader terrorist threat.
There it is. Well, children account for 53% of referrals, James. What the heck is going on here? It's absolutely terrifying, isn't it, when you look at it sort of on the surface of it? Be interesting to get a dig down into some of the numbers. I think from what I've seen, that with young men, almost half of them are being reported for being, quote, far right. Yes. What that actually means in this day and age is certainly up for debate. There have been certain government publications that says that if you read The Lord of the Rings or 1984, that could be a symbol that you're turning to the far right. Wow. But don't look too carefully at any of the bookshelves behind me. Yeah. There must be, by that definition, all kinds of banned... Yes, obviously Orwell was a known right-winger, wasn't he? So don't know where we take that from. And so those kind of things where we say, well, someone says, actually, I think there are only two sexes, not 87 genders or whatever, that's going to be labelled as far right. Silly nonsense like that. And all the while that we're worrying about that, the rest of it is deeply, deeply worrying. And let's call it out for what it is, primarily Islamist, not Islamic, but Islamist terrorism that's happening. And it's only through the hard work of a lot of very, very dedicated, diligent members of the security services that we're able to sleep as soundly as we are. But every day that we bring more people into this country, we don't know where they're coming from, we don't know anything about them, that injects more and more risk into our system. And the worst example of this that I've seen was in Germany at a festival of diversity, where someone comes along and starts stabbing anybody. The number of terrorist attacks in Germany in general is quite scary. In Sweden, it's got very scary. There are grenade attacks happening all the time now. France, France is seeing, not only do we never find out quite why Notre Dame was burned down in the first place, but obviously just the most terrible terrorist attacks, all coming from one very, very scary source. And until we're able to call some of these things out and say there is a problem with an Islamist, as in politicalized, very niche set of Islamic ideas, we can't deal with that. And of course, the biggest victims of that are going to be the millions of moderate or even liberal Muslim Brits living in this country, whom these people are living in their midst and saying, you can't call me out on it or we'll get you as well. So until we can get a grip on that issue, we're going to be living in more and more and more fear. And you've only got to see the fact that I think it was Surrey Police this week who put out a tweet that said at all the Christmas markets and things coming around now, you might see an increased police presence, but
don't worry, they're there to keep you safe. Well, I'm glad the police are there. My goodness me, what on earth is going on that we have to have a heightened security presence at Christmas month?
Christmas time.
Done this to ourselves.
Yeah, there's angels and elves around to do that sort of stuff, you know. James, stay with us. James Price, former government advisor, is with us.